Chris Watts. Jezebel made me do it. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Many of you will be familiar with the individual that is Chris Watts. For those of you that are not, in the early hours of August the 13th, 2018, in Frederick, Colorado, American oil field operator Christopher Watts murdered his pregnant wife, Shannan, by strangulation, and their two children, aged 4 and 3, by smothering them. He buried Shannan in a shallow grave near an oil storage facility and dumped his children's bodies into crude oil tanks. Watts initially maintained his innocence in his family's disappearance, but was arrested on August the 15th after confessing in an interview with detectives to murdering Shannan. He later admitted to murdering his children. On November 6, 2018, Watts pleaded guilty to multiple counts of first-degree murder as part of a plea deal when the death penalty was removed from sentencing. He was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 3 to be served consecutively. At the time, I wrote a blog article explaining his narcissism, and that later became the basis of a video, which you can watch, which was released in November 2020. All you need to do is go to the A Very playlist, and you'll find it there, or you can search amongst my videos if you look for H.G. Tudor, Chris Watts, A Very Dangerous Narcissist. Thus, I determined that Watts was a narcissist, and some recent news that has emerged in relation to him provides a further opportunity to explain more about his behaviours and also about narcissism with regard to the way that a narcissist conducts himself. An article by Steve Helling in the New York Post tells us, "Killer dad Chris Watts is now blaming Jezebel mistress for his decision to brutally murder his wife and little girls." Killer dad Chris Watts is blaming his former mistress for his decision to brutally murder his wife and 2 little girls, and only refers to her as Jezebel. The Post has obtained several handwritten notes from the 39-year-old Watts, who is serving a life sentence in a small cell at Dodge Correctional Institution. Now, pausing there. First of all, Watts had a mistress, so he was cheating on his wife, which is part of his narcissism. Not every person that cheats is a narcissist, far from it, but having established that he is a narcissist, his cheating was based upon his sense of entitlement, his lack of emotional empathy for his wife, his lack of emotional empathy for his mistress. The fact that he had no sense of accountability to conduct himself in a way that would show fidelity. It was a means by which he could assert control over his mistress, Nicole Kissinger, and it enabled him, of course, to draw fuel from her. His wife was in the sustained devaluation, and that meant, therefore, that, in effect, his narcissism gave him the green light to cheat. This is what happens during sustained devaluation. It doesn't automatically mean that the individual is going to cheat. What it does mean is that during the golden period, the narcissist won't cheat because the person that they're with is painted white. They're seen as this wonderful individual with a golden glow around them. And in effect, the narcissism wants the narcissist to treat that person well so that they get them under control through benign manipulations. However, when that person, who is the intimate partner primary source, enters a sustained devaluation, as they always will, they become painted black. And essentially the narcissism says, it doesn't matter if you go and see somebody else, this person has let you down. If we were to put it in legal terms, it's effectively saying that the other person has committed a repudiatory breach of contract, allowing you to walk away from the contract without any kind of penalty. Thus, in the mind of the narcissist, driven by that person's narcissism, they see the other person their spouse, their boyfriend, girlfriend, etc., as an individual who has in effect let them down. And in the circumstances, what that then means is that they are perfectly allowed to go off and sleep with somebody else for the purposes of asserting control over them. The narcissism sees no problem with them doing that. And it's the same here with Chris Watts. His narcissism allowed him to take a mistress. However, it doesn't just end there. During the sustained devaluation, his wife, who he killed, is painted black. His mistress, Nicole Kessinger, is painted white. But then, as time passes, his mistress has become painted black because that is the basis for him then blaming her. That she was the intimate partner, secondary source affair partner, and I understand that then, of course, she would be painted white as he interacted with her, but thereafter, because nothing can ever be the fault of the narcissist, this results in the narcissist blame shifting. Accordingly, it wasn't him that was the motivation for killing his wife and his children. It was his mistress's fault. And she became painted black and found herself being made the scapegoat for his activity. That the blame is placed upon her. In a letter written back in March 2020, which only appears to have seen the light of day recently, Watts wrote a prayer of confession. "The words of a harlot, smearing, have brought me low," he wrote. "Her flattering speech was like drops of honey that pierced my heart and soul. Little did I know that all her guests were in the chamber of death. How did I let this happen?" he continued. "The blessings you have bestowed upon me were right in front of me, and I still followed the perfume of a strange woman." This is typical behavior of the narcissist, a complete failure to take account for his own behavior, a failure to take account for cheating on his wife, a failure to take account for the fact that he killed his wife and his children. Nobody else did. He did. It's often the case that you'll find with a narcissist that they will cheat on the intimate partner primary source. They will have an affair. At that point, the spouse is painted black, the affair partner is painted white. It may well be the case that disengagement follows, so the narcissist leaves their partner and goes off with the other man or the other woman. They become the intimate partner primary source. And of course, as night follows day, and the fact that we're all going to die at some point, that person will enter sustained devaluation. And then they become painted black. This sometimes increases the prospect of the former intimate partner primary source being hoovered, because then they suddenly become painted white. But then what happens is that typically the narcissist, in attempting to hoover back the person that they left behind, will say, "Oh, she poured honeyed words in my ears. I had my head turned. I took leave of my senses. It was her that pulled me away from you, darling. I didn't realize what was going on, but I was conned. I was manipulated." And thus, the narcissist, in attempting to manipulate the former intimate partner primary source and perhaps get back into a relationship with them because they are now painted white, smears the affair partner. Once again, the narcissist takes no responsibility for their actions. It's always somebody else's fault. They left their wife for any number of reasons which they would regularly whine about to their affair partner. Then it's gone wrong with the affair partner, as it always would do, causing them then to complain to the former intimate partner primary source, "Oh, I was taken away from you. I was coerced, coaxed by this Jezebel that poured honeyed words in my ear." And we see exactly that kind of behavior with Chris Watts. Whilst he's not saying these words to his wife, of course he can't, she's dead. What he's doing is blame shifting and seeking to assert control by blaming somebody else for his actions. Only one person killed his wife and children, Chris Watts. Nobody else did it. Nobody else encouraged him to do so. But his narcissism tells him that it's not his fault, and it causes him to believe that it was actually Nicole Kessinger that caused him to behave that way. He blames her. The article continues by explaining that Watts shared most of his thoughts with Dylan Tolman, a fellow prisoner at the Wisconsin lockup who befriended Watts. Tolman was in the cell next to Watts, and the two men became close. Thus, the narcissist in prison has a non-intimate secondary source individual in his fuel matrix. We started talking, Tolman says. We had a lot of very long conversations, spiritual conversations. Tolman was in prison for possession of narcotics when he met Watts. Although he has served his sentence, he's now serving 4 months for driving on a suspended license, which was a probation violation. They began studying the Bible together. Again, with Watts, the holy narcissist, watch my videos about that, with Watts even calling Tolman his spiritual twin, flattery, assertion of control through benign manipulation. They studied the scriptures together and talked daily, often encouraging each other about the hardships of life behind bars. One of the letters that Watts wrote stated as follows: "Dear Heavenly Father, I have backslidden. I am like a sheep gone astray from the flock and have fallen into a pit. The snare of the enemy has entrapped me. The words of a harlot has brought me low. Her flattering speech was like drops of honey that pierced my heart and soul. Little did I know, all her guests were in the chamber of death. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. How did I not see it? How did I let this happen? The blessings you have bestowed upon me were right in front of me, and still I followed the perfume of a strange woman. The web of the enemy squeezes around my heart and is corroding my soul to the point of suffocation. The enemy and his Jezebel mock and scourge me as they celebrate another capture. But oh, that men would praise the Lord for his goodness and for his wonderful works to the children of men. You, O Lord, did not leave me captive or condemned. You heard the prayer of the destitute and of the prisoner appointed to death. You opened my eyes, you made my ears ready to perceive, and you said, Come forth. The web of death loosened its grip, and I walked into the light of your presence. As I humbly kneeled before you, you said, Go and sin no more. Your faith has made you whole. In that letter, he, of course, is demonstrating his magical thinking in relation to God. He doesn't truly believe. His narcissism sees it as a route to justify certain behaviors and how he can be saved, because after all, it wasn't his actual fault, but somebody should save him nevertheless, which exhibits his sense of entitlement. Furthermore, as already mentioned, it exhibits the way that he blames Nicole Kessinger, suggesting that she has led him astray because, after all, Chris Watts isn't a bad man. Not at all. It's simply the case that he has been led astray by a Jezebel. The typical blame-shifting, lack of accountability of a narcissist. And the disclosure of this letter and others of a similar ilk once again demonstrate the nature of Chris Watts and provide an opportunity to explain to you the way that the narcissist behaves. Even though he entered guilty pleas, they weren't actual admissions of guilt, because he doesn't really think that he's done anything wrong. Somebody else caused him to do it. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.